will replace Lewis Hamilton at Mercedes. Welcome back everyone to Formula One Transfer Talk, and after this week's bombshell of a news story that Lewis Hamilton, 7-time world champ, is joining Ferrari, today I'm going to tell you who I think is going to be the most suitable driver to replace him. And let's not mess around here. These are astronomically big shoes to fill. These are unprecedentedly big shoes to fill. And so any driver that comes into this team has got a high ceiling to aim for. We've got to mention, though, that in that other seat at Merc is going to be George Russell, a driver who's been there for 2 seasons now. One of those seasons got the better of Lewis Hamilton. So let's just do a blanket statement. Start off this video by saying that George Russell, for now, is going to be that team leader. Yes, they're going to need someone to come in to really push George to achieve his best potential, but I think they're in safe enough hands where they can afford to take a bit of a gamble. They can take a risk for a season or 2 and still know that they've got a bloody good racer in George Russell in their other seat, and a driver that I feel, if they had a championship-winning car, could take the fight to the likes of Max Verstappen, Lando Norris, Charles Leclerc, Lewis Hamilton. Don't forget who's going to be in that Ferrari. So George has got to step it up a little bit this year. Had a difficult 2023, but 22 was amazing. His time at Williams really did shine a spotlight on the fact that this boy can race, especially in the midfield, especially in some terrible machinery. So I expect George to bounce back this year and be that number 1 driver for Mercedes. So I think they can have a bit of fun with this second driver to replace Lewis. I think they can afford to wait, knowing that they're a top tier manufacturer, knowing that this is a coveted seat. Everyone is going to want to be in that Mercedes, because apart from the Merc seat, there's no spaces at McLaren. Long-term contracts for Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri. No space at Ferrari. Likewise with Hamilton and Leclerc on long-term contracts. And Red Bull, Max is locked in. What about Sergio Perez? That's going to be that other seat I think people are going to have their eyes on. Also Audi as well. But right now, this is the best seat that's available. Mercedes can wait. I've got a list of drivers, so let's jump into it. Starting off with the man who is being left in the cold by Ferrari, and that's Carlos Sainz, a 2-time race winner, 5-time pole sitter, a driver who's a safe pair of hands. And whilst I really like Carlos Sainz, I think he's a driver that is underrated, is consistent. Is he going to give Mercedes that bit of spark, that flair factor? I'm not too sure. And this then comes down to, and again, reiterating the fact I think they should wait, comes down to where you are at the end of the season with George Russell. If George, you want him to be that number 1, you've got no doubt in your mind that he's world champion material, then I think Sainz is a good shout. He's got experience. He's not someone who is going to cost the team a lot of money through mistakes. He's a very, very safe driver. But he's not always going to be finding that last 10th to get you those pole positions, to get you those wins. I know it's been a difficult time at Ferrari, but I just think when you need that bit of star power, I just feel that Sainz, as good as he is, as consistent as he is, and we know from back in the day that consistency, I believe, is the number 1 skill you need to be a successful Formula One driver. It's just that final 10th, that final inch that I think he's missing, where I kind of feel Merc should be a bit braver. So Sainz, I think, is the solid shout. That's what you go for if you're confident at the end of the year George is going to be your number 1 and you just need a consistent point scorer. But I think you can be more fun than that. And a name that I've seen bandied around and I think would just be a huge story, perhaps just as big as Hamilton going to Ferrari, maybe not quite as much, is going to be Fernando Alonso to Mercedes. I think that Aston project, whilst it was a tremendous leap of faith, and boy did it pay off last year, I don't see it this year. And there was that incredible drive from Fernando in Interlagos at the back end of the season when that car wasn't at the peak of its powers. Shows to me that Aston still have that fight in them to be able to be fighting at the front and pushing that team forward. But with Lance in that other car, that kind of is speaking volumes that maybe their aspirations isn't on the level of a Ferrari, a Red Bull, a Mercedes. And Fernando, we know what he's like. And also ages isn't on his side at this time in his career. If it's not a good 2024 and there is a Mercedes seat available, I think he's going to jump at it. Realistically, I think 3 seasons maximum left for Fernando Alonso. Why not have a go in that Mercedes? What an end to his career that would be. And also, just picture Fernando Alonso in the Mercedes versus Lewis Hamilton in the Ferrari. Tell me that a week ago, and I would not believe you. So that would be so much fun. In Fernando, you've got a quick driver. You have got a driver with that star power. Multiple world champion that George Russell can learn from. Don't forget that Mercedes as an outfit, since their return in 2010, have always had a world champion in that car, whether it was Schumacher, Rosberg and Hamilton. Always had a world champ. So Fernando would be just chef's kiss. Is it what they need, though? They need a bit of stability. With a figure like Lewis Hamilton leaving, is Alonso going to be that? I think if you get the Fernando we've seen at Aston, I think you possibly could. I think his relationship with George Russell is also a really, really handy thing to have in their back pocket. They're very, very good friends. They party at New Year's together, often seen on the grid together. So whilst Fernando wouldn't be a long-term option like Sainz would be, I think actually of the two, Fernando is that step up. And I'm going to talk about a driver later on who is a Mercedes young driver who's a little bit too young at the moment, but a couple of seasons down the line, a bit like George Russell when he went to Williams, I think will be in line for a Mercedes seat. So I think for now, Merc only really need a driver that is going to be in that car for a couple of seasons. So Fernando Alonso, I feel, is my most likely driver to be getting this seat, which is crazy to say, I know. But I just think they need star power. A safe pair of hands for 2 years. Fernando is that man. Someone who is going to push George Russell, but also George is going to learn from and be a strong benchmark for. I just think everything screams Fernando Alonso in that car is the right option. It would be brave, but it would be incredible. A driver, and I'm just going to throw this in there, who I also think is a very similar kind of career profile, and again would be a huge story, maybe as big as Hamilton. No, nothing's going to be as big as that, but pushing it anyway, would be a return to Formula One for Sebastian Vettel. A driver, I know, I probably should have a longer pause there. Sebastian Vettel to come back to Formula One out of retirement to join Mercedes, a team that in the past obviously have had a lot of title fights against, but a team that have kind of flirted with Seb a few times. Seb, obviously his hero being Michael Schumacher. Michael ended his career at Mercedes, and I think Vettel would quite enjoy that. The only thing for Mercedes and for Vettel, and why I'm not going to spend too long on this, is does he still have it? Is that hunger still there? And I just feel, unlike when Alonso left and when Raikkonen left in 2009, there hasn't been these stories circling around a return. I think if Vettel was to return, this is going to be the only time, the only opportunity is that Mercedes seat. So if there's not going to be stories now, I don't think there ever will. Even when Audi come in, if he's not going for that Mercedes seat, a car that could get him more victories, could get him another world championship. Don't forget. I mean, he's got a few already. You know, number 5, going for number 5 in that Mercedes would be iconic. I just think too big of a risk for Mercedes, even for a 1 or 2 year contract. There's too many unknowns there. It would be an amazing story, but not for me. And on a similar front, on my list I have put Daniel Ricciardo. I think Ricciardo is such an unknown, but it still just hasn't quite clicked in my brain how bad that time at McLaren was. Because if you take that out of the equation, if Mercedes got that Renault Daniel Ricciardo, that Red Bull Daniel Ricciardo, it's a no-brainer that you go for it. But on the flip side, he was pretty strong at AlphaTauri when we saw him last year. If he has a good 6 months, might not be an opportunity for him to get into the Red Bull. Mercedes may go for him. Again, they just need someone for a couple of years. And though it didn't work at McLaren, that's not to say it wouldn't work at Mercedes. We've seen countless times drivers struggle at a particular team and then move to another one and absolutely excel. Alex Albon, also on my list here, really struggled at Red Bull, but look at him go at Williams. Ricciardo would be a star figure, would be someone that's going to draw sales, draw attention to the team, just like Lewis Hamilton did. And as quick as George Russell is, does he have that star power? I don't really think so. And actually, that's kind of why I'm hesitant to suggest Carlos Sainz as much as I am, because Russell and Sainz, it's a good lineup, but where's the pizzazz? Where's that drive to survive, bringing in the fans, really getting a bit of momentum behind the team? I don't see it with Russell and Sainz. Whereas Russell and Ricciardo, Russell and Alonso and Vettel, I see that. And so Danny Rick to Mercedes would be a dream come true for him. What a return to Formula One that would end up being. But again, it's just whether the team feel that's too big of a risk. So that's why they need to take their time, assess all their options. So Alonso for me is still number one. I want to say Ricciardo's two, but the man I've kind of just mentioned, Alex Albon, I feel sneaking in there a bit. And I've never hidden away from the fact on this channel that Alex Albon, as quick as he is, that time at Red Bull was very difficult. Very difficult. And it's such a hard one to judge, because he was up against Max Verstappen, the beast that is Max Verstappen. And Max, at that stage, wasn't at the peak of his powers, but was getting very, very close to it. And Alex was fresh. He was in his rookie year, and they chucked him into that car. And there were some fantastic performances, but only a couple of podiums to his name in that strange 2020 season. One at Mugello, wasn't it? That was his first podium. And then another one later in the year in Bahrain. I just think that might be a bit too much of a risk. No matter how good he's doing at Williams, do Mercedes want to take that leap there, especially when you've got the likes of Alonso potentially being on the market, Sainz being on the market? I feel like Carlos is a safer pair of hands. He's had more experience with Mercedes engines in that McLaren, fighting at the front with Ferrari as a multiple race winner. So Alex, I feels a little bit lower down the list. No matter how good he's doing in that Williams, I just think that might be a risk too far for Mercedes. Esteban Ocon is another name I've seen branded around, and a little bit like Albon. What have I seen from Ocon that's going to make me say, get him in that car? It didn't happen when Valtteri Bottas left, and that was Ocon's chance. If he was really outperforming in that Alpine, and he did well up against Alonso, don't get me wrong, but he was consistently outperforming his car, he'd have been a shoo-in for that Mercedes seat. And yet George Russell, who was in that Williams, kind of managed to jump the queue. And it's a little bit more stickier than that, don't get me wrong. Ocon had left the Mercedes family by that point. But either way, if Mercedes deemed him good enough, he would be in that car already, if that kind of makes sense. So there's a chance, if Ocon has a strong season, maybe he could get in there. But he's struggling to beat Pierre Gasly, who was in his first year at Alpine last year. Again, there's not enough star power there. They need a big name. Ocon's not that for me. And the last name I'm going to throw out there, as much as I love Nico Hülkenberg and would love for him to be a Mercedes, to finally get that podium, a German driver in a German car, I'm not going to talk about him as my final driver. It's Kimi Antonelli. And he's a driver that I think lots of people would have had absolutely no idea who Kimi Antonelli was until this week, until Lewis Hamilton's announcement. And crikey, what a way to be thrown into the limelight. So Kimi Antonelli, 17-year-old Italian racer, part of that Mercedes Junior program, is yet to race in Formula 2, but is going to make his debut this year for Prema. So very, very coveted seat to be in. He's already, his name is certainly in the hat for the title hunt in Formula 2, along with Behrman, Hauger, Bortoleto. But Antonelli has just ripped it apart in his junior career, is on such an incredible wave of form, and just seems to dominate every single season he is in. So he was part of the Nico Rosberg Racing Academy, so already got Mercedes links there. And then 2022 ADAC F4 and Italian F4 in the same season, champion in both. Last year was in Formula Regional, champion yet again. And there's just something about this guy where you feel that is someone that if he smashes F2 is just going to jump into Formula 1 and straight away be a very special talent. That kind of once-in-a-generation talent that you just cannot afford to let slip between your fingers. And if he wins F2 next year, if he absolutely destroys it, just like Charles Leclerc all those years ago. Was it 2017, I believe it was? Charles Leclerc in F2. Maybe they should take a risk. It would be so harsh on the youngster because he's being thrown into that seat to replace Lewis Hamilton. But isn't that what Hamilton did? Jumped into that McLaren in 2007 and just bossed it from day one. And Antonelli's that kind of level, I believe. I mean, it's early days. He's not even driven in F3, getting fast-tracked into F2. And he would be 18 on his debut in Formula 1 if that was the case. I've got no doubt he's going to be on the grid that year. That's how highly I'm rating this youngster. And I think it would be so bold of Mercedes, but so fitting to replace the greatest of all time with someone who has the potential to be on that level. A lot of pressure for the youngster. And again, he's not on the top of my list because they do need a bit of stability with someone like Hamilton leaving. They do. But if they want to show guts, if they really want to make a statement and you're not going for Alonso or Ricciardo, Antonelli for me would be so much fun and just an incredible story. Let me know who you think is going to be Mercedes' new driver alongside George Russell. It's been a long one, but you know what? It's been so nice just to sit down and discuss these opinions. I'm sure there are more drivers on the list that we've not spoke about today, including Romain Grosjean, who, don't forget, has still got a test with Mercedes in a Formula 1 car coming up. So there's a chance, ladies and gents. As always, if you are new, feel free to subscribe. Thank you all very much for watching. I am looking forward to getting back to regular Formula 1 content in 2024. So if you want to join the journey, that subscribe button is down below. A like is so appreciated, and it's so lovely to see you all in the comments. So that is where I will be right away. Thank you very much for watching, guys, and I'll see you all in the next one.